Woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends the beast with wrath, because he knows the time is short. Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666.
Oftentimes, old-school Nintendo and the NES era was known for its cheerful, friendly games. This obviously isn't one of them. This release surprised me very much as a kid whenever I saw it in the rental section of the local video store. I did rent the game, took it home, and it surprised me how dark it was. Being a fan of horror movies, even at that young age, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. It's really hard to explain why. It wasn't for the shock value? Was it because it was a completely different style of game, with it being mostly text-based with just a picture in the corner to operate with? Was it the fact that it almost combined an RPG element that at the time I thought was a new style, having recently played Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy, but actually a style that predated even the computer era? Everything comes together in this very unique title for the NES, known as Uninvited. The NES enjoyed a trilogy of 3 games ported from the Mac Venture series, which is a trilogy of games that came out from Macintosh computers. They were ported onto the NES down the road. The ports gained color graphics, but were also rather censored, and the text in the games were formatted to better fit a television screen over a computer monitor. Everyone remembers Shadowgate, and many people remember Deja Vu, but it seems the final game in the trilogy always gets overlooked, and in my opinion is the game that has the best setting of them all. With the gameplay sometimes requiring a larger leap of logic than its predecessors, the atmosphere of this game is astoundingly deep for one that simply takes still pictures with you taking a mouse cursor over the objects to interact with them. I remember playing this game as a kid the first time I'd rented it. I was kind of far from home. I was staying with my grandfather and my uncle. Both had a fondness for gaming on the NES. We rented some games from a small bookstore. It had a small selection of maybe 20 or 30 games. We had picked up Mega Man 3, another game I love, and Uninvited. The cover to Uninvited, it really stood out to me. It reminded me of those horror movies I'm not really supposed to be renting, and I got a thrill from having a chance to look at it, and just the idea of having that image running on my NES was just nuts. So the game begins with you in a wrecked car with your sister missing. You explore the inside of the car for too long, and it will actually explode on you. So, on your second attempt, you escape the car, and you end up in front of this large mansion, which actually has a reference to Aleister Crowley. So after opening up the mailbox, you retrieve an amulet, which actually gives you entrance into the mansion. It kind of sounds like Resident Evil, but I feel that Resident Evil almost steals the idea of this evil mansion to go through from this game. On top of exploring the mansion, you get to check out the backyard where there's an observatory, a greenhouse, and a chapel which has a cemetery almost built like a maze. One of the biggest things, I keep bringing up the front cover because it has one of the best little scares in the game. Scarlet O'Hare, who will actually turn around with this wicked-looking skull and will attack you, actually becomes the cover of the NES game. Really neat little feature. Now, the story does have a few similarities to Shadowgate. You come to find that the mansion was home of a great magician. One of his apprentices, called Draken, starts killing everyone in the mansion. And you're actually in the middle of trying to unravel this story while trying to fulfill your primary goal of rescuing your sister. So, if you really like Shadowgate and Deja Vu, this game's right up your alley. If you like the old PC point-and-click adventures, this one also is right up your alley. But enough about the details of the game. We know it's a horror game, and we know it's a point-and-click adventure game. I'm not going to spoil the story for you guys, because it's got an awesome story. However, I want to go into the backstory of the game, and where it originated from, and how it ended up on everyone's favorite system, the NES. One of the first styles of gaming on early computers was the text adventure. A great example of this is the Zork series, where you have a small text-based little screen that states you're in the middle of a field, you have a White House in front of you, a forest to the left of you, and you have to type in certain directions and whatnot. A lot of computer users loved the freedom that these games gave them, but by the type of games that they are, they could only really target a small audience, because your average person might be interested in the game, but he's going to get ticked up whenever you've got a poor interface between yourself and the game. Whenever you have a game that maybe doesn't recognize up, but it recognizes north. It doesn't recognize pick up the club and beat the monster with it. A lot of people get frustrated with games like this. Well, then comes the Apple Macintosh in '84. The Macintosh was really unique because it gave a visual operating system, and not only do you get the visual operating system, you've got a cool way of actually getting around in this operating system by using a mouse instead of your keyboard. Now, this is great for usability for a computer, but it also opened up a whole new avenue for gaming. And that brought along the Mac Venture games. The Mac Venture games were developed by ICOM Simulations, and they had made other apps for the Macintosh. However, the Mac Ventures were awesome because they were completely integrated into the operating system, and you could play them using only the mouse. The first game released was Deja Vu in 1985, and if you go back and play Deja Vu on the NES, you'll see that it's more or less the same game engine. Not only did the Mac Venture games have a basic click interface, they're also well-written, extremely well-written. Now, yeah, they do have some serious plot lines, but they've also got some kind of a sense of humor, especially whenever you're looking at certain things, whenever you get killed. A lot of times there's kind of like a dark humor to these games that I really like. The four games that they did come out with was Deja Vu, Uninvited, Shadowgate, and Deja Vu 2 Lost in Las Vegas. Deja Vu, Uninvited, and Shadowgate are all available on the NES. Deja Vu 2 was made available on the Game Boy in a dual cartridge with the original Deja Vu game. So, that's more or less the history behind the actual Macintosh versions. Of course, the NES versions were ported over. Uninvited was the third game. It came after Shadowgate, which came first, and Deja Vu the second. It has a similar style to the original two games. In the computer version, you could find magic words that call upon spells, and the magic words were kind of different, because you needed to combine several words to make a full sentence in a chant in the PC version. In the NES version, you just have a spell page in your inventory. For a good example, in the computer version, you can talk to a doll to converse with it, but in the NES version, you don't have a talk command. You actually have a spell for this called Doll Doll. Well, okay, it's kind of weird, but it does work. You get some extra spells. There's one that you can use to teleport outside the hedge maze, which really helps after you've maneuvered your way through it and you don't feel like backtracking through it. Another difference between the NES version and the computer version is that the computer version had a time limit. You have to beat the game in a certain number of moves, or else you become possessed and it's the end of your game. In the NES version, there's an item that you can grab, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but if you grab this valuable item, you have to get rid of it, otherwise this valuable item will kill you. And it never really tells you what kills you either. As well, that of course the Macintosh version didn't really have much of a soundtrack, but the NES version had a killer soundtrack. Some other minor changes that were made: the sibling you need to rescue was an older brother in the Mac game. In the NES game, it was a young sister. A cross was changed to a goblet because Nintendo didn't want anything referencing church. The mail is addressed to Master Crowley, 666 Blackwell Road, Loch Ness, Scotland. Now, once it moved to the Nintendo version, the address and location was removed, but they actually kept Master Crowley, which obviously is an allusion to the occultist Aleister Crowley. In the tower in the PC version, you'll find a ghost that's holding his decapitated head in his arm. They reattached the head in the NES version. And the pentagram in the living room was changed to become a star. The NES doesn't allow you into the mansion until you open up the mailbox and get the pendant. You have to have the pendant to beat the game. So, in the computer version, you can actually enter the mansion and become locked in without the pendant. So, automatically you're in an unwinnable situation. That's play it. I, of course, recommend the NES version, but you can play it on the original Macintosh version, IBM PC, Commodore 64, Amiga, and Windows-based systems as well. If you're going to go play it, I would recommend first the NES version. If you don't want to go with the NES version, the Windows version is also a great version to go with it. That's gonna be it for this review. I know I didn't go into too much detail on the game, but I don't want to spoil the story for you guys. All you need to know, it's a horror-based click adventure. So be sure to check it out this Halloween if you've never played it. Until then, we will see you next time.